Hello, bootstrappers.
Hello, bootstrappers.
Hello, bootstrappers. So going into our design process here, what I did was take the initial feedback you had, the initial ideas and concepts you shared in that first brief, and came up with a few different concepts, not fully distilled by any means, not what we would call high fidelity. These are more sketches and rough ideas to get us talking. I've found that while putting expectations in words, ideally we can all fully express what we want to see in words, but it doesn't happen like that. It's truly, you interact with colors, you get a certain emotion. You interact with symbols, you get certain associations. So it's a mix of like putting your expectations in words and seeing them at play in actual graphics. So having said that, this would be our BR1. Our main intention here was to convey the concept of testing. So testing your way forward is how I labeled this idea. Of course, it's a combination of the chart that's rising, meaning indicating growth in the company, and more of a traditional instrument you would see in a lab setting. So the combination of both. Exactly. They're acting together just to send a quick message that this whole bootstrap revolution is largely dependent on your ability to measure and learn from what you're measuring. So defining some key performance indicators, monitoring them closely, and growing your way with a very data-driven approach. That would be perfect. And then we also had this purple inspired color palette here because it is very reminiscent of activity, forward motion, energy. It's just this type of purple is the perfect combination of blue and red, but it's closer to the blue end of that spectrum. So what it gives us is, again, that efficiency, that energy. And moving along, BR2.
I'm so glad you're going into like the thought behind the color because I was really curious. I like that you just gave us the color and we got to have our experience with it, but I had curiosity around it.
You're totally right. And that's part of the exercise. Just, there's so much background and so many thoughts that go into each design decision. This is true for every design decision. If it's being made in a very thoughtful way, there's usually a lot of symbolism and just arguments and ideas that we're trying to bring into the composition. But it's always great to leave it more open and see if the intention we had when we create these artifacts is truly coming across. Because ultimately designers can have the best of intentions, but they may not translate well in the execution. So for me, it's really key to leave it up to you guys to interpret, and hopefully it matches the intention that I had behind these choices. That's the ideal scenario, but sometimes it doesn't. So that's why I just make it all reaction and see what happens. BR2, which would be our second concept in this first round, was a little bolder. The idea here was just to go more on the blue side of the spectrum, very tech inspired, but also very motivational. So the general message here was, you've got what it takes, right? So there's this bold typography. Here are these wings, and here's this kind of badge feel that you're getting from this mark, where it's like something you might see in a t-shirt, something you might see in someone's laptop as they're building this thing that's keeping them up at night. It's infused by force. I think it's something that comes across when you look at how these lines, how these diagonals are going sort of from left to right. There's a little bit of movement. So definitely bolder than the first one, which was very static. We're in a lab setting, we're testing. Now it's like we're moving in a certain direction.
One of the things that was really great about the drafts that you sent over was how they were. You gave us a lot of different domains to hone in and narrow in on. With this one, we definitely had a sense of movement, and it to me it was a little too sports feeling. But both of us cued in on like the idea of Mercury or like the god of messengers and movement.
That's really interesting hearing you say it because, again, that was the intention. And sports are very forceful. I mean, there's a lot of that momentum in sports. So the fact that you related them is this mark did accomplish its objective. It's just perhaps not the type of energy we're looking for this symbol. Okay, let's proceed with the third proposal here. Also very much experimentation driven. This one sort of interlaced the idea of a cosmic revolution with the individual letters of the brand. So bootstrap revolution, and it's intertwined with these really thin orbits. And there's a single dot, which is the dot in the eye, that seems to be like in the revolution, in the whole movement. I tried to offer some more playful hues in this palette because, we'd come from basically two or three tone palette here with the purple and here with the teal. This time around, there are two very strong colors involved, which would be your light teal on the left and your blue tinted purple on the right. Not sure what your reaction was to this one initially.
Well, felt kind of a superhero, atomic revolution sort of feeling.
And that was certainly the intention. I believe the title or the label for this one was a mindset revolution. Definitely intended. Any other thoughts around this one?
I think that both of us are a little more shy around color. I
did pick up on that after the first round.
Yeah, but no, it made a lot of sense. And again, it was just such an awesome, contrast from the first and the second.
So here's a little behind the scenes of the goal I'm trying to accomplish with these divergent artboards. Like, here's this very clean, minimalistic concept, but here's this bold, all over the place idea with like a really bold color palette, in your face, very explicit. And I try to just offer those and see what you react the most to.
And so the process for those in the audience, the directions that we got with this first revision was to look at the marks, the logos, to look at the typography, to look at the colors, almost as like separate things that we could then mix and match. So it wasn't, hey, do you like this one? Take it or leave it. It was for us to look at each of the elements to see, what parts we liked.
Exactly. And this is why, for context for the viewer, that's why all of these artboards are coded at the top, just to make it easier to reference a specific color or a specific type choice, any specific idea here. You can just, for example, say, I really enjoyed the type choice in BR2, which would be the second one here, but I'm preferring the symbol in BR1, which is how feedback actually ended up shaping. Like, I don't know if you remember your comments to this initial set of ideas, but it was very much along the lines of, we definitely gravitated towards BRX in typography and BRX in color. So you can get really granular with the codes.
So I've been learning Adobe Illustrator, and I had like 8 videos on artboards this morning. So I'm assuming that's the program you use to do this in.
Yes, though most of the Adobe suite, at least when it comes to 2D graphics right now, is relying on artboards. So in the past, artboards used to be exclusive to Illustrator, but I've seen them in Photoshop recently. And so I think it's becoming more of this omnipresent tool. But it's Illustrator vocabulary for sure.
That's my new word for the day, was artboard.
Here we have, I think it's 6 of them, 6 artboards. And then for your final, which you got the actual Illustrator file, that's also organized in artboards. So you can just take it as you're learning how to use the tool. I think that could be a good file to work with. So for BR4, the intention here was to imply that when entrepreneurs are building their startups, destination isn't always crystal clear. Sometimes you have to readjust the way you orient yourself to find that end goal that you're looking for. So the label was destination disruption for this one. Just a combination, when it comes down to symbol, the combination of lightning and more traditional, a compass rose, exact compass that you would use when you're hiking or finding your way in the outdoors. So very subtle, but also it does have this kind of diagonal left to right energy. Like you feel that something's happened. Either this compass has just found the right direction or it's in the process of calculating it, but something's happening. It's not static.
And so to me, this one was really spoke to in our brief, us wanting to provide tools for our audience and a compass being a really critical tool.
Exactly. And that's, again, just, it reinforces the importance of a well-conceived brief, like actually sitting down and trying to narrow down these themes that you want to convey with a symbol. Because there's no way a graphic designer, as much as they want to get involved with the brand story, as much as they want to get close to it, when you're outsourcing these kinds of deliverables, there's no way they're going to be able to read everything that's on your mind. So you kind of have to put it in paper as much as you can. And sometimes that's a combination of, as we were saying at the beginning, that's a combination of words and visuals. If you want to take your creative brief to even to a next level, you can complement your written answers with some examples of what you've been looking at. And that really guides the eye for the designer working on this. The last concept here, the R5, it was thought of more as an identifier for a potential group of people. That's why you have the badge shape encapsulating the cursor and these orbits around the cursor. It's no surprise that this particular brand is very tech-driven. There's a lot of tech-based entrepreneurship. And so the idea of a cursor as a symbol does represent, the form of empowerment that these entrepreneurs have. It's not just any kind of tool that they'll have. We couldn't just use a hammer here and have that represent what these entrepreneurs are doing, because it's very distant from the actual work that they're going to have to do to move forward in this space.
Well, it was interesting. 100 years ago, the revolution was the hammer, right?
Right.
The communists, but that was the times.
Exactly. And after I submitted this first round, I remember clearly that was part of the feedback. Like, you wanted to convey that kind of empowerment, that kind of strength, and that kind of revolution, which is very fitting for the brand. And you knew you wanted something inspired by that kind of movement. And by that kind, I just mean, the original Workers' Party logos and that more industrial,
subversive
poster aesthetic of the Communist Party. And Communist parties all around the world, because you can think of, there's a flavor of this in China. There's a slightly distinct flavor of this in Russia, what used to be Soviet Union. That's the word I'm looking for. The Soviet Union.
Yeah, like the people rising up type thing. Even you go back to the French Revolution, it's a similar concept, but less tool oriented because it was pre-industrial age. So what we learned, and this is what you were saying, Laura, words. I can have words, and I can be really clear on which definition I mean. But if I don't make it explicit, then it's going to be like the word revolution. When we saw this, I was like, oh, you know what? We never actually said what we meant by revolution. And you nailed all these different flavors of revolution, and it was clear. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Because Will and I spent so much time talking about it that it just became in our bones. And we thought, well, of course it's like visible. So we did an enhancement. Like, we went through and there was some font we loved, there's some colors we loved, and we're like, you know what? We really didn't get across more of the core ideas. And so we did go back.
Take a look at that other iteration.
Okay. Yeah. We added some words. We added some visuals. All right.
This is what you're referring to, right?
Now walk us through the revisions and your thought process there.
Exactly. Just like you were describing, the second round was more about capturing the essence of revolution and expressing it visually in a way that we didn't in the first round. First round was very much focused on bootstrap. On the first part of this brand name, and how entrepreneurs have to test their way forward, how they have to maintain that forward momentum, how they have to sometimes reorient themselves based on that experimentation. So there's the compass analogy. But this time around, we wanted to express force and a little subversion, a little healthy subversion. So the concepts here are inspired by some of those workers' revolutions, rights revolutions that have shaped our reality. The hope being that we can build something that inspires entrepreneurs to reshape their realities and the realities of the customers they're trying to serve. The first version here, which this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but this is the direction that you ended up going for. And the reason I believe for that is that it combines 3 different elements that express what you're trying to accomplish here. There's the cloud, which immediately gives us a sense of height. Like this whole revolution, this whole brand is about elevating individuals' desires to change something. The entrepreneur is always trying to change something, to alter a process, to improve a process, to reduce their end customers' pain and or satisfy their desires. The whole notion of elevation, of not being on the ground, but rising was important here. There's also the element of the hand, which is very explicitly an allusion to force, to rights, to that level of defiance that is so characteristic of successful founders. They're here to change something, and to change things, it's not just about knowing how to do it. Sometimes you just really need to knock some doors. You need to make your point of view heard. And that can sometimes mean shaking things and breaking things. And so there's some force there. And then the wings, which are rocket wings, bird wings, or anything like that. So here you are. We are going to guide you through the process of finding the tools, the inspiration, the education that you need to take this idea and scale it and make it grow.
I was going to say one of the things, but here, there was actually a lot of things that we really liked about it. You know, the cloud was really great. The elevation came across. You were really wonderfully particular with the hand that you drew. And because we did a lot of research around, is this going to step on any other symbols, especially symbols that are being active now? We don't want to be disrespectful. And yet
Black Lives Movement issue, especially because we're not trying to take their symbol. So we didn't actually express any of that to you. And so when we first got this back, we're like, oh no, it's too close to ELM. But the more we looked at it and looked at their symbols, it's very different. And the hand symbol's been around for a long time for a lot of different types of revolution. And then we actually went and surveyed. We went and took a survey amongst African Americans to see if this was too close or far enough away. And the results made us go, okay, I think we're comfortable with it. I think we're ready to move forward.
Yeah. So this is actually part of your book too, where, you know, we did survey the audience. We're like, you know what? Let's go ahead and take more from the book. Let's survey the audience. And we basically honed in on that demographic because we wanted to be really mindful. And we said, you know, here's a logo. What are your first thoughts? What do you think about it? Does it bring anything to mind? Does it remind you of other symbols or logos? And if so, what they are? This is the brand that we are. This is our mission of our brand. And do you think it fits or doesn't fit? And so it
cost us $75, I believe it was.
$75. We got the answer back in under 5 hours.
Did you use PigFu or something similar?
We used AYTM, which stands for
Ask Your Target Market.
Yeah.
It's another one I'm a huge advocate for.
Mainly because they reduced all the friction. I mean, and we'll put the resources down below in the video description, but some of them wanted to send us a quote and then get us on the phone, and then it was like a $500 minimum.
It was going to take
us just made it easy.
Well, that's great context. Just knowing that you did a thorough gut check to make sure that this wasn't appropriating any kind of existing symbol or offensive to a specific group. It's always wise to do that when in doubt, always ask. Yeah.
There's a playfulness to this one that we really like. And when we get to the end of this, want to kind of give you a sneak preview and where we're going with it.
Oh, that's great. Looking forward to that. One last note about this one is sometimes you have universal symbols like the hand that are very effective at at expressing an idea. So what ends up happening is they end up being used in various contexts for different causes. This is actually the case of the hand. But when you build out the composition, add supporting elements, integrate typography, and when you add the color layer, there's so much change that happens to that symbol that it's as if it had these multiple lives. You know what I mean? Like as a symbol, if you see a red cross, that's one thing. But if you see a blue cross, that just strikes you different. If you see a yellow cross, it just symbolizes a completely different idea. So also to be mindful is how symbols have different layers to them and how the end composition can carry completely different associations than the symbol in isolation. Just something to be mindful of. Here's the second concept within that last round. This one was, yes, very much still about the revolution, about planting your feet on the ground to promote a certain idea that you have, being firm around your ideals and your values as you build out this company. But the fabric and the flag wasn't just any shape. It's very intentionally something that looks like lightning and carries that energy to the right, towards the right.
Yeah, we
very
saw
minimalistic. You also saw it?
Yeah, we like the lightning in that.
It's subtle. This, I would say, is a more minimalistic, very minimalistic interpretation of the idea. But sometimes you have brands that have so many different applications. Like they have to think about invoices and stamps and,
right.
and embossing and all these different printing techniques. And so they always prefer something that's easier to execute. And this would be, a good option for a brand that's looking for something. The last two ideas on this list are actually both inspired by the hand. This I would call an early concept that gave way to the first one. This one came before. It was just exploring, what happens if you give this worker's hand, yes, thrust, but also what happens if you give it rocket wings, if you truly accelerate it. That to me captured the spirit of Bootstrap Revolution well, but again, it was kind of an early concept that led to the ultimate choice.
Go ahead. We like that one, and we like the thrust, like the upward motion, but the cloud added a nice playful element while still capturing the elevation.
Exactly. That was also the impression I had. And then this one, again, going back to that more minimal approach, it's just the combination of a few of the concepts we had in round one and the hand, though this is a very different hand. If you go back and look at the vector for the version you ended up going with, this one is more refined. The curves are simpler. It feels more tech associated than this hand.
Well, and that one's actually closer to BLM. I mean, they have more of an angle on the knuckles, but they come in from that side. So it was a little too, from that point of view, I mean, there were other things I liked about it, but.
This one feels more political. Sorry, go ahead.
We knew the hand was different, but I didn't have the words to say that the top one was more tech, and this one, once you show that contrast, does feel more back towards industrial.
Exactly. It's these angles are closer to the political rendition of this hand, and these feel closer to an icon, to a minimal graphic you could see in any modern day application, for your phone, for your tablet, web-based. It feels very seamless as a part of a modern user experience. I would say it's closer to tech, this first one. Yeah. And then just, to close this part, we have our final choice. Because like I mentioned before, you were drawn. This one, it feels similar. I mean, it's, if you just quickly take a glance at both V2, which is the file we just looked at, and this one, you can think, well, this is just the same that we had before, but there are actually some optical refinements. They're very subtle. But for example, when you have this black black background version where your vector is in light blue. There were some issues related to weight, like the stroke of the cloud. It was just a little bit thicker. It felt a little bit heavier on the eye. So you do all those corrections at this stage when you're about to think of applications and, your kerning typography just a little bit, making sure the spacing between the letters is exactly where you want it to be, that it's legible. And you start also thinking about different kinds of representations of this, because in the final files, you guys saw some minified versions of this. Like if you were to use it in social media and you only wanted to go with the mark, how would you do that? So there are some different file versions depending on the end use. And that really makes you think about the details that maybe you don't see when you're operating on a white artboard and everything's pristine. Like you have to think of all these different concepts and contexts. So.
Yes, well, I need to go back through the deliverables and make sure I'm grabbing the right one for the right use.
Well, I'm just sitting here looking at that T-shirt, and I'm like, we need to order ourselves some T-shirts. That would be while we film this.
Oh yeah, I'm down.
And you're actually both. Well, we're all in black, so it wouldn't be that much of a change. We'd just be branded.
What size T-shirt do you wear?
Me?
Yeah.
Just S. I would love a T-shirt. Am I being offered a T-shirt? I'll take it.
We figure out T-shirts. We'll send you a T-shirt.
Well, they have all those print on demand. So yeah, we could just upload the artwork and position it. So we'll definitely send one down your way.
I'd love that. Just as a final note on this artboard, and this is something I want to convey very clearly to entrepreneurs that might be watching this. There used to be a time when licensing a font was prohibitive, like
yes.
Very expensive, very out of scope for projects like this, for branding projects. But we're at a point in time that's actually really exciting, where you have these independent type foundries popping up all around the world. And so they're making typography more accessible. You can actually license the font for desktop use at a relatively low price. We're talking strong type families for $30, $40, $50. If you would have brought this up 30 years ago, that's not what it looked like. And so you don't have to default to system fonts. You can get creative with your choices. And then upon final delivery, obviously I have transferred a desktop license for this font that I've purchased in your name to you. There are different types of licenses. So if you were to build an app with the font, it becomes more expensive. You have to license it for an app. I just wanted to put it out there because it's part of the whole lean trend more than
like just all of the subtle pieces that make us distinct. And what was great is like Canva allows for you to upload a font. And I was reading the font licensing requirements. The limitation is we can't embed the font family in a way where somebody could pull it out, right? And so Canva, because they actually convert it into an image, then it becomes non-usable for the end user. So I feel like we're inbounds with that.
Yeah, and there's more and more provisions understanding or accommodating for these new browser-based design apps. Because the version of Canva you're referring to is the Pro, right?
Yes.
The business version. Once this site becomes your go-to design tool for desktop design, it just falls under at least the spirit of a desktop license. And then you get into the nuances, which you did, and that's fantastic, where you read the terms and determine whether these browser-based design tools would fit under the license. And for the most part, that's pretty common that type foundries are okay with that kind of use. As you said, as long as it's not something third parties can abstract and grab.
And there's a lot. I've gotten where I do read licenses for business. It's important. And they did a really good job of being explicit about the intention that they were serving with the license.
Well, Eva, do you want to show where we're going with this?
So here we are, the logo. If you see the wings, one of the things we loved about this is this right here, this playfulness, this idea of every single one of us like from an entrepreneur point of view, if you go back into our history, we're all dreamers, huge imaginations. We're just like thinking outside the box. And so to have a notion of design, build, sell, and these should be, so you'll see like just the motion in the background, the notion of like, the whole design, build, sell, kind of really tying in the idea of, this revolution starts really young, but it doesn't matter what age. That's a preview. What do you think? I can't see your face. Where are you?
I'm here. I love the idea of bringing in those short videos. It wouldn't make you feel the same if they were just static photos. The one you have for design is very close to my actual design process. I don't start on paper and drafting shapes. I actually start with some Post-its and trying to understand what the key themes are and what the intention is. So that's very spot on. Build also feels very spot on. It's never organized. It's always a little bit messy. Well, sell is just, she's loving that sale. I'll tell you that. Not everyone loves selling. She's making it feel very fun, which I like. This little girl metaphor, it really captures our intention with the graphic. I'm actually seeing the exact same shape and it's making me happy. Just that she has these actual rocket wings.
Well, the funny thing is this is an image that inspired us from the very beginning, and it's interesting that it ended up in the logo. We didn't share, obviously we didn't share it with anyone, but we had talked a lot about it.
So did I read your mind?
I don't know. It all kind of came together.
When things are story driven, when these processes are so story driven, there's those, I wouldn't call it, it's not like it randomly happened, but these things can happen because we are so in alignment around what someone that feels identified with Bootstrap Revolution looks like and acts like and thinks like, that it's a natural outcome of that. I'm so glad to hear that this was like your starting point or one of your starting points for inspiration.
So I would say that to bootstrappers listening that when you go through this kind of design process with somebody, tell the story together. That when we went through the iterations, it wasn't just us lobbing the ball over and getting a deliverable. We iterated so that we told the story together. And it just happened.
Synergy.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. This was great. I think both of us really enjoyed working with you on this, and hopefully our paths will continue to cross. I definitely have recommended you to several people as we're going along. As, hey, there's this really great person if you're trying to do this.
Thank you so much for that.
Fabulous working with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, count me in for any quick advice or anything. You just need another pair of eyes on. Well, I can't wait to see what you do with this, friend.
See you soon. Thanks a lot, Laura.